Welcome to the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insights podcast series, where we address challenges and ideas for early-stage and entrepreneurial business leaders. Your host today is Dave Coffaro, Interim President and CEO of the Greater Irvine Chamber.
Welcome, folks, to this episode of the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insight Podcast. I am your host, Dave Coffaro, and I'm glad you tuned in to today's episode. So, how we show up, how other people in our professional lives see us, how we help people feel comfortable in our presence. These are characteristics or even practices that matter an awful lot in our business. There's a terrific book that I have that's called Seeing Yourself as Others Do. It's by Carol Kurz and Tom Mugnavan. And one passage from the book says, self-awareness is essential to being authentic and understanding the impact that we have on others. When we're willing to look at ourselves more objectively and courageously examine our blind spots, we improve our ability to be effective in our personal and professional relationships. I love that. And effectiveness in relationships is essential, which leads us to today's topic, which is how to elevate your brand with business etiquette. And to tackle this lofty topic, I'm joined by Theresa Thomas, a professional development and certified business etiquette expert, and her company is Theresa Thomas Etiquette. So, Theresa, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
So to start out, would you share exactly what business etiquette is and why it's important in today's professional settings?
When people hear the word etiquette, I think often they think of manners, particularly in a social sense. But when we say business etiquette, it just really refers to the rules and behaviors that govern how we interact in a professional environment. It still comes down to being able to show others kindness, courtesy, respect. And as you just mentioned, Dave, putting others at ease and making others feel comfortable.
You know, I think a lot about the importance of first impressions, and we hear often it's hard to change first impressions. Why is it that they're so important, and how can we intentionally, mindfully manage those?
There are a few things to keep in mind when we want to manage the impression that we give others. You had mentioned earlier in your introduction the book, and that reminded me that at Stanford Business School, do you know that the most popular elective is what the Economist magazine calls touchy-feely? And it is it's a class where the students learn how others perceive them. And their comments are that it's the best class that they ever took. So for years and years, it's been the top elective. So it is important how others perceive us because perception is reality, right? And that first impression happens immediately. We may hear that it takes 3, 5, 7 seconds, but research out of Princeton University tells us that in 1/8 of a second, in 1/10 of a second, people form opinions. Maybe we call it a gut feeling, but there's just something. There's a feeling that we have instantly. And the reason it is so important to have a great first impression is because we rely on those first impressions. It's just human nature. That's just how our brain operates. And once we have that first impression, everything that happens afterward is seen through that filter of hopefully a great first impression. If it's a poor first impression, then unfortunately everything we do after may be seen through that filter of a poor first impression.
So I want to play this back. What I heard is in 1/10 of a second, people are evaluating. And in a way that sort of is counter to training that we have had in the professional world for so long to suspend judgment, to suspend evaluations. Is there something there that's sort of built into our wiring that goes beyond our cognitive ability to suspend judgment? Or how can we make those snap determinations so quickly and then have to work through them?
People have asked me in the past or just commented that Well, it's not really fair. I don't think that's fair. It's really not a matter of being fair. Like you just mentioned, it's how we're wired. It's how our brains work. I always do emphasize, however, that people do need to really give that person the benefit of the doubt. If unfortunately they make a poor first impression, give them another opportunity, give them another chance. But I really teach my attendees at my programs how to tweak that first impression, because it's asking an awful lot of someone to know our core values in just a moment, but that's how our brain works. So there are several things we can do. I like to call it getting in shape to make an excellent first impression. And N stands for your introduction, SHAP, that's your smile, your handshake, your appearance and attire, your posture, and your eye contact. Those are all for the most part, it's all nonverbal. Your introduction, obviously, you're speaking, you're introducing yourself in the business arena with your first and your last name, and perhaps a little bit about yourself. But everything else is nonverbal. People will form a story about who you are the moment they see you.
So, as I think about how important that nonverbal dimension is, we really lost a lot during the pandemic in terms of missing those cues, those social cues, and perhaps that has affected people's ability to practice proper etiquette. Do you see that there's sort of some long-lasting impact from the COVID experience that's affected the way people show up in their etiquette?
Yes, absolutely. And this is what I hear from my clients, particularly those that just coming into the job market, and they just had not had that opportunity to have a lot of social, personal, face-to-face interaction, because let's say they finished their graduate studies on video, on Zoom. They weren't able to connect with people during that time. Then they have an interview that's on Zoom. So they're not even able to personally connect with people that may be hiring them. And a lot of companies, of course, are now having their employees come back into the office. And we need to polish up a little bit. We've gotten out of the habit, let's say.
Well, that leads to the question, how has business etiquette evolved in recent years, especially with the rise of remote work and virtual meetings?
Well, we have a whole new area of business etiquette to consider, and that is on video. Whether it's an interview or it's a meeting or it's just a quick chat, things come across differently on video than they do in person. So I actually have an entire program talking about how to convey the impression you wish to convey on video. You need to consider things like lighting and your tech, your camera, the camera angle. You wear different clothing, your gestures are different, your facial expressions are different. You have to watch for those nonverbal cues more closely, because you usually just have from the chest up as far as, interacting with that person and what you see. You can see them talking, but you only see a small portion of their body. So it's really hard to sometimes completely understand and connect with what they're talking about.
With that in mind, Theresa, is it safe to say that when our first impressions are created online, that it might be important for us to strategize in advance and intentionally kind of think through how we want to show up?
Absolutely. Yes. It's a completely different situation when you're on camera versus in person.
Yeah. So that kind of leads to, what are some of the most common etiquette mistakes that you see business people making?
Well, there are a few different areas that come to mind. Some common mishaps, interrupting others during conversations by finishing their sentence. I'm sure that you may have experienced, and many of us have experienced it in the past, and that was one I had to work on, finishing the person's sentence. But I think probably the most important thing is to really focus on and learn how to listen actively. active listening is critical to making that connection and building the rapport and letting that person know that you're happy to be there, that they're interesting, and you're enjoying the conversation with them. Also, I would say being too informal in some professional settings. I always say to err on the side of being a little more formal. You're less likely to offend someone if you're just a little more formal with a smile versus being too informal or too casual.
Well, I think what goes along with that is if you start out a relationship a little more formal, you can always step back and be more comfortable, more casual, but it's really hard to go the other way. If you start out super casual, it's kind of hard to shift gears and then be formal.
Absolutely. And the natural progression is to become a little more informal as that relationship develops with that client or that colleague. We have all the other areas of etiquette too. We have email and business cards. How do you properly exchange business cards? Networking. What's a proper introduction? How do you properly introduce others? Whose name do you say first? What if someone refuses a handshake? When it comes to business cards, keep in mind that a junior executive does not ask a senior executive for a business card. If you've ever been refused a business card in that setting, it's very awkward, and it's the last time you would do that. So I'd like to really tell my attendees, because it's happened to some of them, and it can be very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's an important note. And so I think part of that goes to something you said earlier in this conversation, which is looking for the cues. And I interpret that to mean the nonverbal as well as the verbal, but kind of reading the room to see how should this play out. So being really attuned to those cues and clues as they come up.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with one of the things you said. This is my confession, but the interrupting. So culturally, and we're not going to get deep into culture, but my family's Italian. And so there is no such thing as interrupting because everybody talks at the same time. I happen to be married to a woman from Cuba, and in her words, they're even less attuned to the concept of interruption than Italians. And so we were very comfortable with each other because we both talk over each other, and that was fine. Mm-hmm. But having to recognize that doesn't always work. And there are many settings where that is completely inappropriate. It's a good reminder, certainly for me, I don't have to finish anyone's sentences. They can finish them themselves.
Yes, I agree.
So for small business owners and individual contributors, what are some simple ways that they can immediately improve their business etiquette?
Well, I really like the phrase lead by example. So if the business owner, the manager, the executive set the tone for their teams, then I think that's a wonderful way for their teams to all elevate their business etiquette. This means being punctual, respectful, considering all interactions, providing constructive feedback, again, the active listening, and just encouraging a culture of respect and open communication for the entire team and then really the entire company. And it's very empowering for others, and they strive and do their best work.
By role modeling, demonstrating proper etiquette, what I'm hearing you say is that the leader, the business owner, has the opportunity to really set the tone for the whole organization and move the culture in that direction.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right.
That's powerful. And we know how important culture is in the business environment. It doesn't matter if it's a super small micro business or 100,000 people in the company. Culture is so important. So let's take that concept and let's go into something that I know is really important for our listeners, and that's this whole practice of networking. What role does etiquette play in networking, and how can businesses leverage good etiquette to build stronger professional relationships, Theresa?
Etiquette is the foundation of effective networking, Dave. It helps you build rapport, and it helps you build trust, making the person more likely to want to work with you or to refer you to others. Simple gestures like, as we just talked about, remembering names, sending a thank you note after a meeting, being generally interested in your conversations with them. Those things really set you apart.
You know, I have to tell you, so thank you notes seem to me sometimes like they're passé. I got a thank you note from a chamber member last week, and I was really touched by it, that this person took the time to handwrite the note, and it was just to say thank you for something. It was for a lunch, and it was just saying thank you. And besides the fact that it was nice getting something that I could open the mail, which sounds so old school, but that was nice, and getting a handwritten thank you note, it was impactful. It made me think I should really do more handwritten thank you notes, because I like the way it landed on me.
Yeah, that's a great story. And there's so many opportunities we have to send a note, whether it's after a meeting or a lunch or a gift, a referral, so many opportunities. And I do not believe they're old-fashioned, because, as you said, it made such a positive impact on you to actually get a handwritten note that probably had a real stamp. They didn't put it through the business, through the postage machine at their business. And it's kind of a treat. You see something like that, you see the envelope, and you sit down, you grab your coffee, and you open it up, and you read it. And in addition, Dave, this is a fantastic marketing tool. If you were at the office and you receive a note, likely you're going to mention it to your colleagues or other people in the office. That note is sitting there, and it has the perhaps logo of the business that person works on. It's a great marketing tool. Not only is it the right thing to do, and makes the other person feel special, but it also is a good marketing tool.
The way that story played out is I saw this person last week at an event and thanked them, and they got a big smile on their face. Yeah. And so it was kind of a win-win situation, which leads to, we're in a digital world. We text, we do social media, we do email. How does etiquette come into play when we think about things like email or social media? And are there tips that you have for maintaining professionalism without coming across too formal or too impersonal in those media?
Regarding social media, one of the things that I always stress to my attendees is, if you do not want that email on the front page of the LA Times, the New York Times, or on the 5 o'clock news, do not post it. We have all heard of many situations where people have been, embarrassed, they've lost jobs, some very negative things because of what they have posted on social media. So when it comes to social media, I say, when in doubt, leave it out. And then go ahead.
I was going to say, I like that. And I like giving it the LA Times or the newspaper test. Is this something I would want printed on the front page of some publication?
That's right.
That really helps you make the decision and think twice about what you're saying.
That's your answer. That's right. And then, there's also a structure to an email that makes it simple to read. It's quick, it's to the point, it's concise. There are certain things that you would not want to put in an email, the very sensitive information. But email etiquette is something that will also help everyone to improve the overall impression and perception that they give of themselves and their company. Is
it fair to interpret what you've said up until now that every different approach to communicating has to be informed by proper etiquette?
I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, that's really important. I know I can get informal if I'm texting someone and say, yeah, but they know me. But in a business setting, I don't think that's the right way to distill it.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I also recommend is that you ask them how they wish to be, how they wish to communicate. Because nowadays, I have a few clients that I do text, but we've been working together for a very long time, and we are in a space where that's comfortable and acceptable. However, it is important to ask your client how they would like to communicate. Would you like me to email you, or do you prefer the phone? And they'll let you know, because a lot of people are texting these days.
And I did not hear you say don't text. What I heard was just be cognizant of how you text, how you say it, and how it's going to land on people.
And have their permission to text. Mm-hmm. But sentence structure and grammar still apply, whether you're texting or it's an email, and always err on the side of being a little more formal.
Can't go wrong with that. You can always get less formal later. So as we're coming down the home stretch, Theresa, in closing, what advice would you give to someone looking to elevate their personal brand through improving their business etiquette?
My advice is to pay attention to the small details, because they often make a big difference. Listen more than you speak, treat everyone with respect, and always strive to leave a positive impression. Remember that your actions speak louder than your words. So demonstrating good etiquette will not only elevate your personal and professional brand, but also open doors to new opportunities.
Wonderful. Actionable advice, things people can put into practice right now, today, after they hear this podcast. Theresa Thomas, thank you so much for being our guest today. Wonderful conversation.
It was my pleasure, Dave. I look forward to more conversations in the future.
It's a deal.
Thank you for joining us for the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insights podcast. To stay informed about upcoming podcasts and other important business news, please subscribe to our channel or check the Greater Irvine Chamber website.